Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. For this webinar, we'll discuss the do's and don'ts of SAP security implementation in the cloud. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end. We'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. If you do have a question during our conversation here, please drop it into the Q&A. And we'll either pick it up during the discussion, or if not, we'll make sure to answer those questions at the end. All right. All right. So good morning. My name is Kelly Weber. I'm a senior manager here at Turnkey Consulting. I've been doing SAP security for about 10 years now, and I've done lots of implementations both with cloud and on-prem and hybrid solutions. My specialty specifically is risk and data privacy, and I just love all things SAP security. So I'll have Swetta and Peter also introduce themselves. Swetta, you're first on my screen there, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, good morning, everyone, and good evening. I'm Swetta Singh. I'm a part of the GRC Product Management team. I'm responsible for the access control as well as the identity access governance solutions in our portfolio. And happy to be here to be discussing security topics.
Excellent. And Peter, how about you?
Yep. Hi, everybody. Pete Creal. I'm part of SAP's Finance and Risk Center of Excellence. Been with SAP for quite a few years. Half of that was in our consulting and implementation services with SAP. And then about the last 8 years, I've been in this role supporting conversations with our customers around security and GRC. So happy to be participating today.
Excellent. I think it's going to be a great discussion. So thanks for joining. All right, so today like I said, we'll be talking about SAP in the cloud, how to avoid pitfalls. We all know that SAP cloud-based applications is accelerating, spurred by SAP's introduction of RISE and cloud-based applications such as IAG, as Swetta mentioned already. But securing these applications is not as easy as a lift and shift as some people would like to hope. And migration comes with a host of new security considerations that we'll be walking through and discussing today. So we'll cover how to ensure that security is not just an afterthought when doing these migrations and implementations, but is an integral part of migrations to the cloud. So SAP is driving these cloud applications with programs such as RISE and GROW and IAG, and is heavily invested in cloud applications. So can you both talk to me about the importance of security and adoption when moving to the cloud, and both in terms of ERP, but also in terms of including cloud applications in your total landscape?
Yeah, Swetta, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess the key, I think, drivers for you should be somewhere where we are looking at, what's your landscape like to begin with? Because in a lot of cases, what happens is you would, already have some solution on-prem, and it's more of you're evolving into the cloud. So what are the changes that you need to bring about in your processes? What are the things that you need to consider in case of security? I mean, these are some of the topics that should be in the top of the list. So more like, what's the operational efficiency that you would have to bring about in the entire end-to-end process? Or is there a certain audit or security requirements that comes when you're going through this digital transformation? So those are some of the key things to consider. Again, it all boils down to, what's your operating cost when you come to, the digitization, as in, you have an on-prem, you have a cloud. Is it, lowering your entire TCO? So, which means that when you're evaluating it, you would be looking at, okay, so there's this, 50 systems that I have in my on-prem. and now I'm going into these additional processes that are going to run into the cloud. So what are the things that I really need on-prem, or what are the things that I really need in the cloud, and what are the kind of users, because everything comes with a cost. So there are like various factors that, play into when you're looking at, the broader scope of your landscape. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's what to kind of add on to that a little bit. I think the security concepts will change within that landscape, right? So you may have, traditional ABAP security and what you're used to on-prem and in traditional SAP. And when you move to the cloud, the security model or the security structure is going to change in each of those applications, right? If it's SAP cloud, you're going to have a different security structure in Ariba and a different security structure in S4, and how can you, manage that, and not only from assigning access, right, but also making sure that you're assigning the correct access from a risk standpoint.
Yeah, and also, like, what are you hearing from customers in regards to how important it is for them to migrate to the cloud, and is it something that they are prioritizing or are in their roadmaps at all?
So the way I have seen, and I'll just take a stab at that, we are seeing a lot of customers moving to the cloud, and again, it could be cloud first strategy that's driving it. It could also be the need that there are certain processes now that have to evolve, and that's available more efficiently in the cloud. So there are various reasons why they are moving to the cloud. Also, the very fact that I mentioned, lowering the TCO. So that's again coming into, what's your operating cost of, building out your processes. So those are some of the factors that I've seen. And yes, a lot of customers who were traditionally focused on the on-prem are now looking towards the cloud. I mean, there has been a little bit of dragging your heel kind of a situation where, they're like, let's just, stay where we are, and maybe it might just change. But yeah, now, there's a lot more acceptance. There's a lot more desire to learn more about, what are the cloud features, how security, security was the biggest concern for movement. I mean, so we should not be kind of, so as long as we address that, there is a lot more acceptance to moving to the cloud.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've seen in my clients, all my clients have had cloud applications at least in their 5-year roadmaps. So I do think that most clients are thinking about how to move their on-prem solutions to the cloud. So Pete, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, no, I see the same thing, right? A lot of our customers are, it used to be we had to introduce them to that concept and kind of assure them, right? Kind of what Swetta was saying, that the security layers can be built and can be managed effectively in the cloud. And I think a lot of them now are getting more used to that. And it's now what solutions or what tools we have that can help and ease that process, right?
Yeah, agreed. All right, so just talking about the different phases of a project too, and I think in my experience, the first couple phases are the most important and the most integral in order for success of a project. And it starts with building a business case, so how can clients and customers achieve building a solid business case that includes security in cloud migrations, and why is it important? And I'll just add to that just real quick that I've seen, one of the pitfalls that I've seen is that security is treated as a non-functional requirement in the business case. And when executives see that, they see it as optional, and it can be de-scoped very easily, or they'll say, oh, the functional team will do that, or we have someone else that's not security that can do security. So with that in mind, what are some of maybe things that you think that are really integral in making sure that when clients are building the business case, to make sure that security is a key component of the business case?
So I think, Kelly, you nailed one of them, is making sure that security is not forgotten, right? I think you just like any project, you know, security has to be on the forefront from not just what users have access to, right? But now how do we secure the data within the cloud, right? Because I've seen a couple projects that have gone full stop, right? When compliance team or the security teams of a company don't understand, right? And security hasn't been on the forefront, or at least talked about in the very beginning, and planned for. And I think that's the key is making sure that it's in the plan from day one.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I always use the analogy with my clients usually is that we don't want to come in. Security is usually the firefighters coming into a project, you know, when everything is on fire, and auditors have come in after UAT is done and said, you know, you need to fix this, and this, because they haven't considered security as a requirement at the very beginning. And so we have to come in right before, and, you know, go lives are pushed back and UAT has to be redone because we have to rebuild the security in a way that is secure, that data is being secured, and that it makes sense for the business requirements as well. So as a security professional, I don't want to be the firefighter. I want to be the fire marshal. And so if we can come in at the beginning and start building the structure of the security with the functional teams, it makes an incredibly successful project. Otherwise, it's really difficult to get those projects over the line. So
yeah, I agree.
And Swetta, just for you, how can adding IAG to the roadmaps help assist those clients with building these business case? Because I think IAG is an integral part of these cloud applications, and making sure that the cloud applications are provisioned correctly and appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, again, IAG kind of is in the crux of the whole, you know, end-to-end process that we're trying to build. It's more of a hub solution that's ensuring that you're meeting your audit and compliance need, and that's just like, you know, a segue into, you know, what are you trying to do with, you know, all the application? You need to ensure that people have the right level of access, adequately managed, you know, by a tool, and that's what IAG kind of brings into the picture. So again, having that in the center of when you're designing it is important, because again, the security design is starting with, you know, when we look at from the IAG perspective, is what are your roles like, what are your processes like, what are the kind of access the user would need, ensuring that the right level of access is defined upfront, so that it's not a lot of back and forth and operational cost that comes later on, when if you don't just define a good security model upfront, then it's just that you're paying the price every day when everybody there are users who are requesting for access, and pretty much you're identifying more and more risk as, you know, your organizational grows, and as you add more applications, it would just kind of become unmanageable. So I would say it's really important when you start with a project to actually define, you know, have your you know, again, the business process owners, you have your security IT team, they're both involved in defining what's the right level of access that a user should be granted, and that comes up with the role design process. At least that's where, you know, IAG plays a focal point in terms of pulling that information in, ensuring that you understand that if these are the kind of accesses that you're defining, then these are the risks that you would have to deal with eventually. And this would kind of, I would say, expand multifold, because now you're talking about the same risk being, you know, propagated over to hundreds of users. So it's key, yeah. I would say.
Yeah. I agree with you. And Pete, just also adding to the business case too, can you just highlight quickly too the differences between on-prem and cloud security, and just what can be highlighted, just maybe a tip or a trick that what can be highlighted in the business case, so that you know, executives or decision makers can easily understand the difference between specifically security on-prem or cloud and cloud?
Well, I think the main thing is going to be who's responsible for what, right? Within security. Because when we talk about security, if you're on-prem, typically the organization is responsible for infrastructure, it's responsible for database, it's responsible for all the layers around more than just user-based, right? So, and when you move to cloud, especially SAP, our cloud, right? Some of that will shift, right? A lot of the data security or database security now becomes SAP's responsibility to some fold. But the data and master data and user is still going to be company, right? Or customer based. But it's very similar, but I think it just going back to the very beginning, it introduces different security authorization structures, right? It's not just as simple as I have a user and I have a role, and I have T codes and authorization objects that make up that. It's now I have, maybe permission groups, and depending on the application, how do you manage that, measure that for SOD, right? And that's, kind of alluding to what Swetta was saying about identity access governance is it really can give you that full picture of what users have across the environment, as opposed to just at the application layer of S4 on-prem.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, just from my experience to building a RACI chart is incredibly important for the business case, specifically with security. So RACI is where you'll put, the roles and responsibilities of, your different parts of who's going to be involved in the project, and then who's responsible, accountable, consulting, and then informative for those specific pieces of the project. And also too, just understanding that it isn't a lift and shift. I've had a specific client that thought that because they were going to the cloud, then all security was, they didn't have to do anything. And that can't be further from the truth, that there is still lots of components of security that need to be managed and maintained. So
very good point.
My little tip. Right.
So Kelly, here I would like to, maybe if you could share more about the differences when it comes to, having a hybrid landscape versus, customers who are going on cloud. Key differences that, they would need to consider in terms of security that you're seeing.
Yeah, and Pete, I don't know if you can add to this too, but the biggest thing is understanding your landscape and making sure that the pictures are very clear as to where your applications are in your landscape. So understanding what's currently on-prem and how those work in regards to security, and then also what's going to be future, right? Maybe it's even something that's different in a year and versus different in 5 years. But as a security person or anyone that's implementing, we need to understand where the business is going, so that we can make sure that we're building the structures of the security to adapt to the changes that are coming in the business. It's really important. And that's where IAG, I think, comes in as integral, Swetta. I mean, I know I keep plugging IAG, but without a product or something that can easily provision the access to these cloud-based solutions, you get stuck in this maintaining access and provisioning access to all of these different applications. And the security becomes very convoluted and not easily understood by the business. And then the business gets frustrated, right? That they don't understand what's secured. And so they just say, make me like this person. And now your security is not where you originally designed it. So understanding where you're going and how to provision it is integral. And I don't know, Peter, if you want to add to that, or if you have any other thoughts on that.
No, I think, when we talk about, looking at the plan to set up, I think one of the things, and you're plugging IAG, I may plug a partner, right? The partner side, but having a good implementation partner from the get-go who will put security first, right? Or not first, but in the beginning, I should say. In understanding that it's not, you made the comment, you've heard customers say it's a lift and shift, and now I'm going in the cloud and it's all going to be taken care of for me. Well, that's somewhat true from, again, the basis level, right? But access to data and who has access to that, PII data as an example, it still needs to be a concern, and being able to measure that. And if you're doing the shift to cloud, whether it be with SAP Rise or you need to make sure that your implementation partner, right, your SI, is looking at that. And if they're not, then you need to bring it to them and make sure that they are, right?
Yeah, and you're leading right into my next point so brilliantly, Pete, is just in the project initiation, right? So we talked about building the business case, and now we're actually initiating the project. And you know, my main question is around why is it that vendor capability, specifically when moving to the cloud, we're solution implementation partners, why is it important to choose to choose a one that is security based? I mean, I think we've already touched on it a little bit, but I don't know if you have anything else to add to that. I have a couple examples of some pitfalls too, if when you're.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, kind of continuing on with what I'm saying, right? Is it based on what we've kind of touched on so far, it's still very important that security is in their plan, right? And having a partner during this process, right, that is taking that security side seriously, and understanding that there's different things you need to look at when you move to the cloud. And I think we've already pointed those out. But if you have an implementation partner that's not, you know, factoring that in their plan, then I think you need to look. And I think I'd be interested in your examples, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times, you know, one of the big fours or some big implementation partner has promised the world, right, to a client. I've seen this so many times. They promise the world to the client. Oh, we can do this, and we can do this, and we can do this. And then they get to the security and they say, oh my gosh, this is way more complicated than we originally anticipated. We don't have the expertise to do it, or we farmed it out, or not farmed it out. We've de-scoped it, right, is really what I'm trying to say. And then they have to ask someone that does have expertise, you know, like us, like a turnkey, right, that do know how to secure the landscape, that have done this before, that know the security parts of it, that understand the complexities of a hybrid solution where you have on-prem and cloud. And so I think it's key to make sure that you're asking your solution implementation partner, regardless of who it is, what their expertise in security is. And you know, I tell people all the time, and it's not just because I'm in security, but you can't go live without security, period. You can't. Your project will not be successful without security. So it's really, really integral to understand and make sure that you know the capabilities of your solution implementation partner, specifically in regards to security and both even on-prem and cloud. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times I do feel an application is as good as its implementers, you know. So a lot of times, you know, I do see customers coming back and saying, hey, there's this application that you have, and how come these are the other things that are missing? Definitely, it's important to have, you know, the right mindset of ensuring that you're capturing the requirements upfront, ensuring you have the right set of tools in your box and you're using it effectively. And effectively comes with experience. So it's important to have an experienced, you know, SI who's actually working towards a common goal of security, you know, upfront, rather than kind of an afterthought.
Yeah. I agree. And I think there's a question in the QA that I think actually goes right along with this. If I can get it up here, where did it go? The question is, do you see outsourcing of some security activities as a driver to the move to the cloud?
That should not be the driver, I would say, outsourcing security. But I think the main driver should be your business processes, what you're trying to achieve, you know, with the various tools that you have. Definitely the outcome, one of the outcomes would be that some of your security, you know, questions would be answered with the cloud. But nevertheless, that cannot be the key driver for this move. Yeah. That's how I see it. I don't know how Kelly, you or Pete kind of look at it.
Yeah, I mean,
I couldn't. Yeah, Go ahead,
Yeah,
Kel.
no. Oh, I was just going to say that I think that it's important to understand the expertise in-house of your security and understand, what your in-house security personnel are really good at and maybe what they're not good at. And some of that can be, if you realize, gosh, this is just a little bit more complicated than what our in-house can hold, then I think that that's a really good opportunity for you to look outside and say, who can actually help us with this, even if it's just in the short term, of someone that can come in and help guide and train our in-house people to the implementations and the nuances of the cloud-based applications, so that they can understand and deploy and care for your applications in the future.
Yep, agree. You guys said it. I love it. This is perfect.
All right. Let's see. What else do I have here? All right, solution design. So, we're spending, I think, a lot of time, like I said, on the first couple phases of projects, because I really think that without understanding how to get the first couple phases correct and in place, then doesn't matter what you have going on for testing or implement or go live. So solution design, what are some, when designing a project for cloud migration, what are some key security milestones you think should be achieved and considered when designing the project?
I think, when we look at milestones, I guess, from a project standpoint, it's, you don't want to forget about the testing, right? I mean, you kind of already mentioned that you had to redo UA testing if security is not on the forefront. I think it's very similar to what customers have done with their on-prem solutions, right? From an SAP standpoint, it's, start from the beginning. Don't give, SAP all during development and testing and build. Start with project roles, right? So milestones could be, okay, I have project level security access, right? Then I have testing level security access. And then finally, I have my production roles, right? And my production access. And I think going to the cloud, and if a customer is going from ECC to S4, right? We're opening up different security from a Fiori standpoint, from a HANA database level standpoint. And I think the key part, and this may be going on a little bit further, but once you're, how do you measure all of those aspects together to make sure that you're still preventing risk, right? That you're looking at who has access to the data, who has maybe just Fiori tiles, and then who has access to the S4 system. So I think milestones don't change 100%, right? But I think you definitely need to look at the whole aspect.
Yeah, but anything to add to that?
No, I think Pete kind of covered it well. It is important, to look at your landscape when you're defining, it doesn't change between hybrid and cloud. Let's put it that way. It doesn't. It's just that, how you would achieve it would change, but your milestone pretty much kind of remains the same, But again, like I said earlier, also, I don't want to repeat myself, the risk and the control design is important. It's key to be in the forefront. I mean, your role design is important. I mean, what are the elevated accesses? Who are the kind of users? I mean, so different various types of users that you're accounting for upfront, because not every user is your regular user and an employee. I mean, there are different kinds of job profiles that you're catering to, and all these kind of things need to be considered in your various stages of your project. So,
yeah, I agree. And I've seen successful projects where they map business requirements specifically to test cases in their UAT, where they'll say, which is also really why it's important to have security in your business requirements, and also as key milestones. That way, you can map back, okay, I have specific test cases that are actually testing for these security milestones. And I know that we're successful so that we can pass these milestones and we can say that this one is successful. Yeah, so let's see. All right. All right, so now we're getting to implementation. So this is when hopefully all of your really hard work of designing and doing the business case and making sure your business requirements are all set up, and now you're just implementing the solution. So I think we talked about a RACI, making sure that that RACI is in place and that you're continually checking that RACI, because that can get misaligned sometimes when you actually start going and doing the work. And like I said, we need to make sure that when you are building the test cases and the business scenarios, that we're also including those support requirements, which is really important for cloud, so that your SAP consultants or your SAP partners with RISE can be involved in that process as well, as they can help. And I don't know, Peter, if you want to talk about what you've seen successful with the implementations with maybe RISE in particular in helping do those testing and making sure that they're part of the change management process too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of touched on it, right? Is it's going to the cloud is not really, you mentioned in the very beginning, it's not a lift and shift, right? We can't just take what we've done and think that it's going to work just by moving it into the cloud. The cloud introduces new challenge. I don't want to say challenges, but new aspects, especially when it regards to security. So, planning your UA testing more than just the business scenarios, right? It's making sure that you're not just testing that the functionality works, but you're also testing who has access to what, right? And using a tool like IAG, right, Identity Access Governance, with the SOD rule set, right, to make sure that you're not introducing any SOD risks within your solution, within S4, right, or cross system. If you're using SAP Ariba and creating a purchase order there and then paying it out of S4, I think you need to, that would be part of the scenarios. But I think what we're seeing is that, customers, we talked about greenfield, or we kind of mentioned in the slides, greenfield versus brownfield, right? Greenfield is not, it may be all new implementation, but you can get away with some brownfield, but you just need to take a look at the whole aspect of it, right? I think is my point I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other successful thing with implementation too, is specifically with security, is that as a security implementation partner, is I get my hands in everything. I get them dirty with all functional parts. I make sure that I'm in constant contact with the functional people to make sure that they have security in mind when they're building their aspects as well, even just in master data. Making sure that I can understand the structures of where that master data is and how it aligns with the different parts that are maybe hybrid. If it's an organizational level or a company code that is specific in S4, is it going to be the same in Ariba? Because sometimes functional teams tend to have a little bit more of a siloed vision of what they want to do, because they have their business requirements that they need to check. And they're not always thinking about security. So I think it's important from a security perspective to check in with those functional people to understand how they're building their applications. So
yep. And you mentioned in the previous slide too is standard, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of customers starting to get away from as much customization that they've done in the past in SAP, right? So, use more standard functionality where you're not having to, worry about, if I customize this, is this going to create a risk or an issue, right?
Yeah, such a good point. Such a good point. And I see a lot of on-prem customers moving to the cloud, wanting to customize the cloud so it's like on-prem. So I think it's also making sure that there's a shift in culture, really, and understanding that this is a different it's a little bit of a different process and a little bit of a different feel, but it's okay. You know, it's okay to change, and we'll move along with you.
Yep.
Excellent. We've already kind of hit on this a little bit, so I won't spend too much time on here, but you know, testing, training, deployment, I think it's really important. I think we all know that when you're testing, we have to make sure that number one, that SAP all isn't in them. I've actually seen, I've been to a couple customers who have gone through all UAT, and because they didn't put security in there, they've gone through all AT with SAP all because their functional team just wanted to make sure it worked. I mean, that was the reason. I just wanted to make sure it worked. I didn't want to make the business mad and have it not work. That's the point of testing. You know, I say to my testers all the time, break it. I want you to break it, please. Like, you know, actually, I like to see defects. I like when in testing, I like to see that there are issues that people are uncovering, because I can fix it in testing. It's so much harder to fix in production. So I think even just you know, encouraging the users to break it, I think is healthy for a project. It's very healthy. So yeah, I don't know if either one of you have anything else to add to testing, but that's just my.
No, I think that's, Kelly, I've seen the same thing, right? You know, back prior to cloud, right? But I think it translates very well into cloud infrastructure and cloud systems. Is you have to test with real life roles, right?
Yeah.
Because if you get in, and I guess one of the things within cloud, it's you're not in control at the base level, where you can, if there's a bug or is there something that needs to be done, that's going to be a little bit more from a change management standpoint to get fixed in production. Now in test and in QA, it's a little bit easier, right? Like you mentioned. But once you're in production, it's a lot harder.
Yeah, and I also just want to hit too that specifically with cloud, you know, that they're make sure that you are partnering with your partner, with your RISE partner, whoever it is, to make sure that they're involved in the testing too, that they know what they need to test. Just because you have outsourced or it's you know on SAP to manage those cloud applications, they still need to be involved in the testing. I think sometimes people forget that too.
Yep, agreed.
Also, the other thing that we need to kind of keep in mind when it comes to cloud, you know, there are enhancements, fixes kind of being rolled out daily or perhaps, you know, bi-weekly, monthly. So, you know, you have to be more agile with the entire concept of testing. And, you know, the fact that, you know, there are things that are coming in and you should be ready to kind of test it out and activate it in production. So that's important to be agile with the testing concept, because I know in the past it was like, yeah, when we are, you know, going live, we do the testing, and then, you know, when there is a support pack which can be planned. I mean, we have customers in on-prem that they are in support pack 14 and we are already in 21. So, you know, there was a lot more control from that standpoint. But when it comes to the cloud, you need to kind of move faster also because you want to adopt new features. So it's important to kind of have this testing at the, you know, something that's there throughout your process. It's not a one-off thing that happens every 6 months.
Yeah, I could not agree more. That's such a good point with the support packs coming in too, Swetta. All right, and lastly, just the continuous improvement in operations. Again, we've talked about this is making sure that if you don't have the in-house capabilities of supporting it, that you do, you know, reach out to someone that can either help, you know, even just for a short term to train those people, or if you don't have it at all, to make sure that you have someone that can help maintain the security of both your on-prem and cloud-based applications or your hybrid solution. Usually I suggest that those people are someone that have helped you implement, just because they have the understanding and the history of what that solution is. and they can easily help maintain that. Whereas if you get someone new to do that, then it's just a little bit more difficult for them to understand what your original goals were for the project. So anything else to add for continuous improvement in operations? Swetta or Pete, we're at the end of our slide deck, I think, here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Swetta kind of mentioned it, is the flexibility, right? You still need to stay a little agile because there are going to be improvements in the product within the cloud, right? And maybe new enhancements that you'd still need to be able to test. So security is not as rigid after go live. It still needs to be a little bit flexible, right? So that's why I keep on plugging IAG, but having a tool like IAG that you can still monitor changes to security within the system, right? After go live and during live, I think is very key.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I also think and I don't know, Pete, if you want to talk about maybe even the change the change approval process specifically with cloud-based applications, with RISE, when it comes to just implementing new changes into the environment. Like how does that work? Since Basis and a lot of the databases is SAP's responsibility for cloud.
Yeah, so I think, it depends on what the cloud agreement is, right? And unfortunately, I don't know the specific details, but I do know that you're only allowed to be behind service current service pack minus, say, X, right? So 1 or 2 behind. So you're within the cloud environment, you are going to have updates that you're going to have to test in QA, right? Or in your test environment, and understanding those the changes and then implement them at some point, right? On a change management schedule with SAP. And so there's agreements there that, in order for SAP in the cloud team to support your infrastructure, right, and the application, you have to be pretty close to current, if not very current. And I don't know if Swetta has the details on how many you can be behind, but there's are going to be changes made, right? And you have to make sure that you're agile enough to stay up with it.
Yeah, another thing that happens, and again, this is from the IAG standpoint, like when we're looking at the risk and the SOD as well as the critical access, and we're talking about target applications, which are cloud, and they are delivering every quarter. In that case, what happens is even your risk matrix that you have defined upfront kind of is evolving with every release of, let's say, S/4HANA or Ariba or SuccessFactors, whatever that might be. So again, there are so many aspects that you have to look into, to ensure that the compliance is met. It's not a one-time thing or, something that you can, wait on, because all the applications that you're connecting to also is evolving. So that's one thing that IAG kind of looks into, is to, update the rule sets regularly. So if you're not customizing it, or if you want to customize it, you could still do that. But we also are, delivering the latest and the greatest so that you could, derive from there on and see how you want to kind of make it fit into your business needs. So again, this is the reality of the cloud. Like, it's more agile, it's changing, and we have to adapt to it.
Yeah, such a good point. Excellent. Well, thank you both.
So Kelly, there is one question in the chat about implementation. I'll just read it. I like the idea of using IAG to create SOD-free rules. If we're in the process of implementing in the cloud, can you give an indication of the typical timeline to get IAG live, so we can factor into the project planning and ensure that we use that tool?
Yeah. I don't know, Swetta, if you want to take that one or if you want me to.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I can start, and then maybe Kelly, you can add from your experience. Sure. Yeah, so typically, if you're going with an implementation that's pure vanilla, out of the box implementation, it's up and running within few weeks. However, that's not the case in a lot of scenarios because, if you're a brownfield versus whether you're a greenfield, if it's a greenfield, it's easier. But if it's a brownfield, then you're talking about, your hybrid landscape. How do you want to plug in your existing processes? That would take longer than a few weeks. So again, it depends on, I would say if it's pure vanilla implementation, a few weeks of implementation is good enough. You're using out of the box rule sets and you're up and running in, maybe a month and a half with all your testing in place. But that's usually not the case because in a lot of cases, there is already a baggage that you're going with and you want to ensure that you're relooking at everything more holistically.
Yeah, I just echo that, Swetta, but I'm going to give the consultant the the annoying consultant answer is it depends. It depends on what the business requirements are and the landscapes, like Swetta said, and also just the roadmap too. How many cloud applications do you want to put in now? Is it a brand new implementation? Is it something that you're taking previous, just like Swetta said? So yeah. It can be quick, but that isn't always the case if you have, a lot of complications in your environment. So. All right. There is, let's see. Is another question here. It says, I did not hear you mention granting access using GRC for compliant monitoring, but IAG won't GRC be, but IAG won't GRC be used in the cloud? I'm not quite sure I understand that question, but maybe Swetta, I don't know if you can see it in the chat there.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not sure if I understand it, but I'll try to attempt to answer. Maybe if that's not the answer, you can ask me the question again. So if you are with a GRC implementation and your landscape is evolving, so you can still use your existing GRC implementation, that is access control implementation, and extend it to the cloud using IAG. So there is a concept known as IAG Bridge, wherein we can connect some of the key processes for the cloud using IAG into the GRC process. So that's something that you can do to extend. And again, at the same time, your existing investment in access control kind of remains the same. So if you have key processes like access request, user access review, you could still continue using it in GRC access control and then extend it to the cloud using IAG.
Yeah. There's also a question too, just, and this is, I think, mainly for you, Swetta, is what's the overall customer success within cloud applications like IAG? And maybe just as if you have a specific success story or a specific, something that you can specifically say was successful.
Yes, I mean, we see all kinds of deployment. We see a pure vanilla, greenfield deployment, which is, a customer who wants to go with the out-of-the-box scenarios itself, and they're happy with it. And although, they start with, out-of-the-box workflows, out-of-the-box SOD, they quickly realize that, there is customization they would need in due course. We also see a lot of other customers who are existing access control customers, on-prem customers who want to move to the cloud because perhaps they have, decided to go with, Ariba. And a lot of scenarios where we see that they have adopted to newer cloud solutions from SAP, and they want to extend access control to GRC, as we call it, to enable that. And in these cases, what we have seen is they usually go with one or two applications because they don't want to have two separate processes, one for cloud, one for on-prem, because their compliance would not be met. So in those cases, I do see a lot of those integration edition, wherein they integrate both IAG with AC, and they run some of the processes. So that way they don't lose out on the customization that they had in on-prem, and they still get the benefit of the cloud of extending it. So, I mean, we see like different kind of combinations. A lot of small customers who are going pure vanilla greenfield, they are happy with the out-of-the-box IAG. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I as well have seen many customers that have had successful IAG implementations, and mainly because, they want to be able to provision to those cloud-based applications, and that's what makes them successful. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I think this has been an incredible discussion, and I just want to especially thank Swetta and Peter for joining me today. Please join us for our next virtual event, which is Risky Business. There will be lots of risk and security and identity experts from around the globe to discuss how we can make the world a safer place to do business in the ever-changing risk landscapes. So please join us for this. You can go ahead and use the QR code if you want to register for it now, or you can also find it on our website as well. So thank you all so much for joining, and my contact number is here. If you'd like to contact me with any further questions, or if you have any questions that you think of this afternoon, feel free to shoot me an email. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day.